But now, is renationalising the railway a good idea? Labour has pledged to do just that within 5 years if they win the next general election. Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Haigh says that the current system is not working and it has led to delays and overcrowding. But the government says that the plans are pointless and Labour has no plan to pay for it. So does state ownership always improve things, or could this be a disaster? Do get your calls in 0207 862 2222 and we'll speak to you in just a moment. Lowri, how do you feel when you hear that the railways might be renationalised?
Hurrah, absolutely. This is one area of nationalisation that actually won't cost us a lot of money, because we don't have to reimburse investors who've already taken a large amount of money out of the...
Referring to the water companies?
Yes, because in this case we've got franchises. Apparently all the main franchises are coming to an end over the next 4 years. So we simply don't offer a new franchise and we run it ourselves. And the amount of duplication in terms of procurement, for example, the fact we won't have that if we have one train company will save us money. And yeah, you can talk about how bad British Rail was, and I do remember it as a kid, but it's got to be better than what we've got now, which is really expensive.
Okay, but let's
tickets, really poor service.
Let's look at the other things that the government run. Education, or schools, and the NHS. Do we trust them to also run the railways?
Well, personally, it won't actually be politicians. There will be an independent company run by the government. I think it's the same. It'll be exactly the same people.
Network Rail is already state-owned. I want to know how renationalising the rail lines is going to help. How is it going to improve?
Because at the moment...
Because ticket prices are still regulated, or already regulated.
You ask me a question, shall I answer it? At the moment, you've got the government stepping in to guarantee a minimum amount of
right, so it's done.
Money. So we're already giving these companies money, but they're also taking out money in profit. When we have...
That's called business. That's called business.
Okay,
but when it is no longer owned by the private sector, that money comes back to the government. So actually, I don't trust the government. We have tried not, denationalising. It's been a disaster for many people, for passengers. Let's try renationalising. We can always hand out franchises again if it doesn't work, but I think this has got to be better than where we are now.
So therefore, we're going to hand it back to the government, and somehow they're going to build more railway tracks, newer trains, and cheaper tickets.
We don't need any of those things.
All the problems. If you let me finish, if you let me finish this time. If all the problems we've got at the moment, okay, ticket prices, that's already regulated by the government. The overcrowding of trains, that's still going to remain a problem. Okay, delays on the trains, red signal problems, that's already controlled by the government. How's that going to improve, therefore?
You travel regularly by train?
Yes, I do.
Do you?
Yeah.
Have you had trains leave on time, for example?
Well, they're always late, but then how is the government going to solve that then? I don't understand how that's going to solve. So what we're doing is actually making everything state-controlled. We're not encouraging investment, we're not encouraging business, and we've got this kind of notion that the government's going to solve all these problems. These problems have got nothing to do with the franchising. It's got nothing to do with it. It's actually to do with the government, because it's owned by Network Rail. That's owned by the government. OK,
let's go to calls and find out what you at home think. Michael from West Midlands, what is your thoughts? You're first up.
Hi, mine is that the nationalisation of trains does work in other countries.
Yes, but the nationalisation of other things probably works in other countries that don't here. I mean, I don't think any other countries have an NHS, but that's certainly not working very well here. And, schools are crumbling, teachers are leaving in their droves, we're talking about reducing the standard of GCSEs in order to allow children to pass. I mean, that's not looking too hot either, but we're going to trust them with the railways. Well,
the railway's an easy win to make a profit, whereas those other things are not.
Yeah, it makes a profit because there's a demand for it. There's a demand for trains. So that's why it makes a profit. And you said that in the rest of the world, they are nationalised. But actually in Europe, Germany and France, I think, I don't know if someone can...
I think they're nationalised.
They are nationalised.
So I thought that actually mostly in Europe they were franchised, and that's why they're a success.
I don't know whether mostly, but certainly the two that you mentioned, I'm pretty sure are nationalised.
Surely it is unarguable that if the money that was given out, the companies earned as profits, came back into the system, surely that's got to improve the service we have.
But they can't even do HS2.
Michael, what do you think?
In Spain, they have a high-speed railway infrastructure, which they've been always building on. And I think they've also have one system to rule all of it. And our problem is that, yes, we have National Rail, and they're responsible for the track, I believe. But you've got several countries then fighting for franchises, and then the rolling stock is made somewhere else. Yeah. And the management teams is out somewhere else. and you get the consultancy firms, yet again, somebody else. So you get 26 firms trying to rule one thing, which should be one national project for the good of everybody.
Okay, but
It's
Michael,
no wonder it can't be organised well.
Here's a question. Is it potentially the case that at the moment we have the worst of both worlds? We have the rail network is nationalised, the government's in charge of that, and then we have railway companies running certain lines. So that means that each one of these companies, if the different companies, have a monopoly on their line. What if we allowed 3 different companies to run a line? Then we'd have more competitive ticket pricing. Then we might actually be able to afford to travel from Manchester to Glasgow, or from, you know, Liverpool to Cornwall.
Well, you still got to be on the same line. It's not like the railways or bus companies. You've still got to go on that same line.
Yes.
You can't divert from it. So,
but is the problem
really,
actually
the people, it should be just one.
But I understand your argument, but I wonder whether actually the problem at the moment is not that it's privatised, but the fact that we have granted each one of these companies its own personal monopoly, which allows them to make huge profits.
But you can't run 3 competing trains for the 6 o'clock from London to Glasgow. You've only got one track.
Yeah, because then there's a lack of competition.
So you can't have competition. You're never going to have competition.
Could you have one company running the 5 o'clock train and another company running the 6 o'clock?
Everybody would want to run the one. That's not fair competition, is it? I don't think that would work.
So you would just go make it fair and nationalise the whole thing then, Michael?
Well, it would be the most fair thing for the people, not necessarily for the shareholders or anybody making a profit outside of the country.
Michael, as a taxpayer, let's say we're funding, therefore, the railways. I don't get the train. Why am I going to pay for Michael to get his train into London? He's on 3 times the salary as me. I'm not going to make benefit. I'm not benefiting from that.
You could argue about if you didn't have children, why are we paying for schools? If you're never ill, why are you paying for the NHS?
But that's why it's a good idea to privatise.
Michael, thank you very much for your call. John from County Durham, what's your thoughts? Nationalise?
Yes, it should be brought back under government control, because the privatised railway farce is so grossly inefficient because of the multiple levels of profit-taking that take place between all the different companies that have to run the privatised railway, compared to the efficiency of where one operator would do so with just one set of management, one set of lawyers, one set of employees.
There would certainly be cost efficiencies.
The cost of the railway under the privatised farce is approximately, in real terms, about 6 times higher to the taxpayer in subsidy compared to what BR used to run on. And at least one of the franchises in the north of England got a franchise granted to them that they lost because of their incompetence, where they had it for 8 years and they were going to get about 3 times the subsidy for that 8-year period that the whole of BR used to run the entire railway system for each year. And they were only using running one part of it. We really need the taxpayer not to be fleeced anymore by this privatised farce that is only being kept in place because the government's in the pockets of the people who run these companies, and the ministers who run in the government have got nice fat little jobs when they're made redundant.
Well,
by the rest
I was wondering
at
one point, John, when somebody was going to bring up the bonuses that rail bosses get, which are quite staggering, but maybe you need the best people for that job because you want it to be run as efficiently as possible, and maybe that's how they defend those salaries. But we're talking about £1 million last year for one of the executives.
But John, I'd like to ask John, did you...
I think we're going to have to wrap up here. But John, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this.